The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spagnola.
I have to be honest with you. Sometimes I listen to the intro and it's Ruben, right? If you're new here, you don't know that's my husband. The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spagnola. It cracks me up. I've had that intro for 10 years and I'm never going to change it. It's going to stay as garage bandy as it is, no matter how sleek and produced and professional sounding new podcasters are. I'm going to go for whatever. It's like the equivalent to analog and digital, but it's all in digital technology. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to stay old school, crappy Apple default jingles, and having no idea still how to do sound mixing, and with Ruben and this like tin can sounding music in the background. I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to keep it authentic, friends, because that's what a podcast is. It's not supposed to sound like CBC radio or NPR, because that's radio. This is a podcast. Welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life, broadcasting for the past 10 years, since 2014, sounding exactly like this. I'm your host, Carmen Spagnola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC. And forgive me that little interlude in the beginning, but you know what? Today is my birthday. Yeah, October 28th is my birthday. So I get to laugh at myself and have a little rant right off the hop if I want. I'm a Scorpio sun, Leo moon, Pisces rising. I have 3 asteroids in my first house, Vesta, Athena, and Lilith. Make of all that what you will. I am very excited for this year because at 3:48 p.m., which means, should I say that on the internet? Are people going to do weird things with my chart? You know what? I have 3 asteroids that I've been born under. Like, try, go ahead, do your best. I feel pretty solid in myself. So anyway, there you go. I'm turning 49, and that means that this is the first day of my 50th year on the planet. And I've been so excited to turn 50. I don't really know how, pardon me, I don't really know how I'm going to wait like for a whole year to become 50. But it helps to keep in perspective, but by the time you turn 50, you actually completed 50 years. So I kind of feel like I'm starting to celebrate my 50th birthday now. And then in October 2025, I will be well and truly 50. I also just want to say I'm recording this quite exhausted, so I might be coming in a little hot. I might be a little spicier, and I also might be a little more kind of spacey and tangential because we're in the middle of this like multi-month protracted relocation, and I'm doing, Ruben is out there trying to get power, water, internet, all those things set up so that it's kind of like being the mayor of your own little municipality when you decide you're going to live in a place that has not had utilities before. And so I'm out here packing an entire house that we lived in for 10 years by myself. And I want to cry just saying that. So anyway, happy birthday to me. I'm having a goodbye and packing party today. And people are going to come over, hopefully bring me cake, give me a kiss and a hug goodbye, and also stick around and pack with me for a couple hours. So send good thoughts. Anyway, things I'm so grateful for this year, all these 49 years I've been on the planet. First of all, the silver hair that's starting to come in. Okay, this is how tired I am. I'm starting to tear up over that. I'm so grateful for the silver hair. It feels really important to me. I'm also really grateful that I'm like well into late stage perimenopause. And that also feels like just like another step towards becoming the crone I want to be. I'm also, I got to say, I'm really grateful for this relocation process that we're in the midst of. I don't want to sound like an ingrate. We're really fortunate we have a place to go to. And I don't know when that will feel like, yes, I am fully moved and I feel fully settled. But I am taking this massive and important first step to stepping into the identity of farm wife. And I'm grateful for everyone and everything that lined up for that, and also that lined up to bring horses into my life. That's right. Happy birthday to me. I bought myself some horses. They are currently up in the Caribou Chilcotin area with a herd where they will spend the winter having freedom forage and friends. And I will be spending the winter and next spring creating a paddock paradise, a track system for them. So very excited about that. And, there's nothing I'd rather do than make a little witchcraft with you for my birthday. I'm one of those people who celebrates my birthday for like 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after my actual birthday. So if you're listening pretty much any time in October or November, then thanks for coming to my party. And there's so much that I'm grateful for. And I have just so much energy to want to share that gratitude and that joy and the good things that are happening for me. So this podcast mini series is it. This is my party. I can't have a party in person because there's too much going on, but we can have it all together asynchronously and extend the party for weeks. So the next 8 episodes are all part of what I'm envisioning as a self-paced party or like a stay-at-home retreat. Of course, since this is a podcast, you could be listening to this at any time. You could be listening to this sometime in the distant future, not necessarily my birthday or Halloween or Samhain season. But I just had this idea that I would create a podcast series that you could listen to as a personal spiritual retreat to honor the season of the witch and to observe Samhain, the season of the beloved dead. So this particular festival is the point of time in the wheel of the year that we might consider like the evening of the year. So in my Scottish Highlander ancestry and in many different traditions, the evening is the beginning of the year. And when you kind of step out and think about the year as the macrocosm of the day, then the springtime is the morning, the summer is the midday of the year, and the autumn is the evening of the year that's going to lead us into the dark night of winter. So we are in the twilight of the year. And this mini-series, I would say it has like a 2-part rhythm. So the first 4 episodes can accompany you as you are preparing for Samhain. And then the remaining episodes you would listen to all on the same day. In my mind, that would be like November 1st or 2nd. Really, it's just whenever you can get some private time. But after you've gotten your altar all set up and you've like gathered anything you want to do for ritual craft, like, maybe you have a witch ladder that you've already made, or maybe you want to listen to the witch ladder episode to gather all your things and then actually make your witch ladder on the same day that you kind of binge 3 or 4 episodes and do some trance work and journaling and tarot and stuff. So before the pandemic, I would host this live event like this for Halloween, for Samhain. And it would be a day-long workshop, and we would gather around like my long table to do ritual crafts, and I would cook for everyone, and Ruben would serve us hot coffees and drinks, and we would do trance journeys and tarot and all kinds of fun things. And then when the pandemic began, I shifted to a webinar format for those Wheel of the Year events, and I sold tickets to that. And the benefit of doing that online was that I could invite then like really interesting guests, all my friends from all parts of the world, to participate in that day-long event, kind of like a summit or a conference. So we lost like some of the coziness and the magic of an in-person gathering where we got to meet our online friends in real life. But honestly, and I guess this is the introverted part of me speaking, but I actually prefer the expansion and the inclusiveness that becomes possible when you host something like this online, and especially when you make it really accessibly priced. And I really enjoy the power and potency that many people engaging in a shared focus and a shared ritual brings. And I love that much energy focused on the rituals, especially like the rituals that I believe have collective benefit and offer a kind of ancestral healing, especially for exiled ancestors who were, maybe shunned as outspoken rebels, as community healers and leaders, or were branded as witches. And for much of this year, because of everything going on in my life personally, I've known I wouldn't be hosting a live Witches New Year event, even online. And it's, yes, it's relocation, but it's also like I have a new book coming out in January. I kind of want to save my energy for that, but I'm not going to have the hardcover until later in November. Plus, just, all the Americentrism that we're subjected to up here in Canada, I just felt like the American election was really going to pull focus and draw down people's energy. And instead of like trying to get them to look over here, I really want people to conserve their attentional resources right now. I want people to conserve their brain glucose and like focus on what really matters so that we can stay well regulated no matter what happens. So what I want to offer you instead is like genuine spiritual nourishment that you can take in at the pace and dose that's best for you. And I want it to be easy for you to access and like weave it into your calendar at the most convenient time and the most easeful way. And I want you to have it for free. I don't want you to have to work for like dollars in order to receive some soul care and some spiritual nurturance. I just want you to have it. Also, I don't want all the admin. I would rather have this creative part than all the admin that comes with like setting up an online event. Let's just do it. Let's just have it. Let's just be together. So this is the first episode, and you can listen to as much or as little as you want in my mind. But I've created a narrative arc. You don't have to listen to it in order, but it sort of goes in a linear way. And it's the same kind of thing that I would create if I was hosting an actual weekend retreat. We'd start by gathering around the altar. We would invoke the greater benevolent powers. We would take a break to get another cup of coffee or tea and have a little baked good. And then we'd like settle in for a little bit more of an orientation lecture. There might be something where we learn something new and interesting, but especially that helps us have a framework or lay the groundwork for the deeper, more personal inquiry to come. And by the time we get to the end, we'd be, doing something that would be, again, like a collective ritual. Our weekend retreat would somehow be focused on some compassionate energy towards the collective. So that's how these episodes are kind of going to go for the first 4. And then the final ones, it's kind of like when you come back from that morning session in this fantasy scenario, everyone's had like a delicious lunch at tables set with real linen napkins and gorgeous flowers from the garden. Maybe we've had some wine, maybe not, mocktails, maybe like hibiscus rose lemonade or something that's like really playful on your palate. And then we would come together for an afternoon, I call it like a crafternoon session. Like a ritual craft, a craft with sacred intention and spellcraft purposes. So the ritual craft I want to share this year involves not magic. And so for those of you who own a copy of my book, The Spirited Kitchen, you may have already made a witch ladder or 2 even in your time. But I hope that you'll enjoy the episode with the witch ladders because there's a whole lot of research that never made it into that book. And maybe this is the year you make your own witch ladder. And so you can listen to that episode while you craft. And then, I always find that there are some rituals on a retreat that it's like really better to wait until after dinner, like after dark. Nighttime is the right time for certain rituals. So there will be an episode on the Eleusinian mysteries. And I've read a number of books and papers on that ancient and famously secretive rite of passage. And so in that episode, I'm going to share some of the research on that and what experts think actually happened during this 9-day pilgrimage. And we'll fill in the blanks on that with a trance journey, which I'll record for you to do, like with music, but there'll be all the caveats, like don't listen to this while you're driving the car, or, you'll want to do it like on the bus or in the gym or wherever people listen to podcasts. So, on November 1st, there'll be all those very special episodes kind of designed for your retreat. There will also be some kind of pivot episodes, like looking ahead. So 2025 is the Hermit card year in tarot. I'll give you my interpretation of what we might learn from the Hermit card year and how we might approach that card as a mentor in 2025, and how we can learn as much like patience and grace as possible from this card, because we're going to need it for the years that come after. And Hummingbird Star, this year's guest astrologer, you might have seen her on Instagram or YouTube under her handle Astrology for the Revolution. Hummingbird is a collapse astrologer, so meaning she's looking at the transits that may be influencing us at the social level, like the historic level. So things like the American election. So I've asked her to tell us just something about the upcoming transits related to outer planets, not only in next year, but like looking ahead, anyway, we'll leave it to Hummingbird. But there are a lot of signs that point to protracted change and disruption and like an upswelling of revolutionary sentiment and spirit, hopefully for the better and not for the fascistic, So that's something that we will be focusing on. And then like the very last episode in this mini-series is a preview of my upcoming book, which is called Spells for the Apocalypse. It's coming January 14th, 2025 from Countryman Press, an imprint of W.W. Norton. I'm going to read some of the first draft of a chapter, the last chapter in that book, and it's going to help us kind of wrap up 2024, which is a strength card year in the tarot tradition. And we're going to end the strength card year and step into the Hermit year in a good way. So, speaking of spells, that's the nickname. That's what I'm calling my next book. I'm just calling it Spells. In my mind, it's like capital S and italic, like a nickname, right? So speaking of spells, I've had a few people asking about pre-ordering it, and I actually don't want you to pre-order it just yet. There's no rush, and I want to wait for the right astrological moment, and I promise I will tell you when that is very soon, but not yet. And when I do that, I also have something very special, which I think is a very cool pre-order bonus. So I want you to have a chance to make an informed decision on that. So, okay, that is the Witch's New Year Retreat mini-series. So you can kind of locate yourself, so you can plan ahead, so you can kind of orient to like, how are you going to make some time for you to prepare to enter this dark season of the year and invoke all of the supportive, bright, well-loving ancestors that could be called forth to draw near and support you. So that is the Witch's New Year Retreat series, and you're meant to take it in over the course of like 2 or 3 days. Listen partly while you're puttering around the house or out for a walk in nature, maybe when you're creating your altar for the beloved dead, making your witch ladder. Some parts, though, you are meant to listen to while you're settling into a relaxing trance, or like maybe staring out the window, drinking some psilocybin tea, or maybe at bedtime before you fall asleep. It's meant to be a guide and also your companion as you ritually mark the shift into the season of the witch. Okay, so now, first things first. At the outset of the personal retreat, we begin by invoking the beloved dead I was mentioning. So I recommend you look into the folk and spiritual traditions of your ancestors. How did they venerate the beloved dead? Now, I'm one of those kids who was always totally obsessed with Greek and Roman mythology. And I was thinking about this, like, does this track into adulthood? You know how in elementary school there's like stereotypical kid interests? Like there's the kids who are really into dinosaurs, the kids who are into space, the ones into Egyptology, the ones into like cars and trains and machinery, and then the ones that are into mythology. Like, did we all become witches? Is that what happens? Anyway, I like the other things for sure, still do, but I was definitely a little mythology witch. So I was obsessed with how the Romans had house shrines for their beloved dead. And we end up finding this kind of custom actually throughout many of the countries where the Romans invaded and settled. So there's different variations of this throughout the Mediterranean, the ancient Roman world, all the way up through to Northwest Europe. In many Asian cultures, you'll see the ancestor shrines. They're like a special table or kind of like a cabinet. Or in South Asian countries, you often see that there's like a spirit house outside the home, either at the at the street or sometimes in a garden. In a lot of Catholic countries, you'll find small triptychs that can be used as like mini portable altars. And sometimes you might see that in like antique shops, it's like size of an Altoid tin, and when you open it up, it's actually got like some kind of icon of a saint or Mary or something like that inside. In present day, if you've ever traveled in Mexico even, or Central or South America, there's the niche, I don't know, I think it's called nichos or retablos. They're like a kind of folk art, and they sort of resemble like a little diorama or a shadow box, and they're usually devotional. Sometimes they're kind of funny, like you'll see them made for like folk heroes or celebrities or dogs. You might see one that's like Saint Selena after the deceased singer, that kind of thing. And, so they're usually just like a simple wooden box or a tin box, but then they're brightly painted and adorned. Or if they're made of tin, they might be perforated in pretty patterns. And they often have decorative materials like charms or shells or ribbons or beads or some other kind of like bric-a-brac on them that give them a very dimensional quality. And I really like making these kinds of things. So anytime I find like a nice sized little box, you've got the lid and the base. If it's a nice box, like sometimes if you have a box for like cards, like thank you cards or something like that, it's like that size can be really good. And I'll keep them and wrap them in gift wrap or like use a glue gun to stick things to them and put a photo inside of the beloved dead that I want to honor. Or I have done a little sketch, or I've traced images at times. I've also just like taken a picture with my phone of a photograph, like if I didn't want to cut that photograph up, because, printing photos these days, it's like not as common as it used to be. So I would take a photo of it and then send that photo to the printer, like just my home printer, and print it off and then cut out from that piece of paper. And then I'll put that inside the shadow box. So there's lots of different ways you could create your own personal shrine for the beloved dead. And then I have a special box that I keep all of my shrines in. And, I seem to make one or two every year because somebody dear to me passes away. I make them for people. I make them for animals who are very dear to me. Anyone that I would like to continue to revere as an ancestor, like bloodline or milk line. There's actually a really beautiful book, too, called Crafting Personal Shrines, Using Photos, Mementos, and Treasures to Create Artful Displays. It's by Carol Owen. It's older. I think you can get it on Amazon now, though, but I got mine in a thrift store. And but you could look at Abe Books or Thrift Books as well, and it features many shrine artists and offers tons of like instructions and inspiration. You could also go on YouTube. There was a really fun tutorial that I did when I was working more with air dry clay when my kid was younger. And so I don't know if it's like the algorithm, but I like seem to still have people who make DIY stuff with air dry clay that come up. And so not too long ago, I saw one that was air dry shrines by Crafty Chica. I think her name is Kathy Cano Murillo. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And she was creating little nichos. So I think it's really beautiful to create a little shrine for your beloved dead and then bring them out at this time of year. So I have like a Rubbermaid bin. It's like kind of one of the nicer ones. And I keep my shrines in those for much of the year. But then I'll pull them out sometime in October, usually in the days leading up to Samhain. And then these little shrines are all like decorated on, I have like a teak sideboard where I have my main family altar in the living room. And they'll all be displayed there with candles and flowers and offerings. And they generally stay out on my family altar until sometime around like the winter solstice. And at the solstice, I redo my altar. So like you can see that yes, you could have an ancestor shrine that you visit throughout the year. You could use your shadow box as that. You could have a special cabinet. You could have a special shelf. I tend not to. I'm trying to think. What do I do? I have things out that represent my grandmother and my great-grandmother, and they are on a shelf. I guess I would say yes, I have a small ancestral shrine that stays there all year that basically consists of like a little glass jewelry box and some jewelry and a photo. And sometimes I put like a little bit of liqueur or something as an offering, especially for like birthdays and death days. But generally speaking, these shadow boxes, they don't really come out until this time of year, and they stay out through the dark half of the year, and they would go away at Imbolc, kind of February 1st. So it's like kind of a big deal. I really like do it up right. I really, roll out the red carpet for the beloved dead at Samhain. So as I was saying, at solstice, I redo my altar, and there's kind of an energetic shift because at Yuletide, I begin that tradition of 12 days of Yule where I'm working with my altar as a replay of the year in miniature. So on winter solstice, most of the ancestors are removed, like those shadow boxes go away, except for the mother lines. And then the day after that, I'm highlighting the father lines. And then after that, there's a day where we honor the ancient dead whose names we no longer know. And I think of that also as like bringing in the the milk lines and bloodlines. If you're not really familiar with bloodlines, milk lines, and storylines, you can read about it in The Spirited Kitchen, but I'll just tell you now, it's kind of how it sounds. Bloodlines, you have a DNA connection to. You are related by blood. But milk lines are all those ancestors who coached you, nurtured you, supported you, but weren't biologically related to you. So like the aunties that were not actually related, or the coaches, or, anyone who kind of fostered your spirit and your growth. And then storylines are all of those who are mythological. We could say fictional, but they can feel very real to us, right? But they are iconic. And those would be deities who could also be your chosen ancestors. Anyway, during Yuletide, there's like 4 main days where we celebrate the ancestors. Number 1, Mother's Night. Number 2, the second night, Father's Night. And then when we focus on the ancient dead and also like the restless dead, then we're trying to appease them. And then again, on December 30th, I give my focus to the recent dead who died in the past year. And I especially focus then on folks that I didn't know. Like for sure, the people that I know, I have them. And this is when I would create new shadow boxes, and I put them on the altar, December 30th is kind of like the last date I would do that. So that's kind of my deadline. But I also will do things like I will write out the names. I just Google like how many people in Canada died by police violence in the past year, and I will write all their names down. and put them on the altar. So the altar game is very strong at this time of year. So yeah, like I have a general altar that's out all year, but then these special individual shrines come out for about those 6 weeks during Samhain, Halloween to winter solstice, and then like another subcategory of those like special individual shrines stay out, and the rest go back in the special box. But the box isn't entirely put away until the new year. Anyway, so maybe this is the year when you start a tradition of making personal shrines for your beloved dead. That might be really nice. But if you don't have time for another ritual craft right now, don't worry about it. It's okay. For the rest of this episode, we're just going to focus on creating a basic altar, ancestral altar for the Samhain season. So don't worry if you don't have time to make shadow boxes. So what is ancestral veneration and how is it different from ancestral healing? So veneration comes from venerare, which is to worship or to revere, and the VE part of it is related to the word Venus, so beauty, love, desire. So to venerate our ancestors is simply to love them, to honor them. However, honoring them doesn't necessarily heal ancestral trauma. Like it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's a first step. But before we can even begin to heal ancestral trauma or restore our restless dead to a more peaceful spiritual condition, like first we have to establish a personal connection. So first we venerate the ancestors, and after we feel that there's some strength and authenticity to our connection, then we can begin exploring healing the lineage. So I think it's very important to make a distinction between ancestral veneration and ancestral healing. When you move on to do healing ancestral lineages, what that means is we are elevating the restless dead, the ones who, did not die well or are not resting in peace. And then we are elevating them to restore their connection and their position within a lineage of honored ancestors. We don't necessarily do that work ourselves. What we do is we work with recent ancestors, or we can work with the very, very ancient dead in this way. So we work with the dead who are well, who are not still lingering in trauma, who are not stuck, who are not haunted, right? And there's lots of ways to do it. It can involve special rituals or magical practice. It can involve mediumship or past life regression. Some more trauma-informed ways I've been involved in include family constellations or even trance work. I don't want to put the cart before the horse and get too deeply into ancestral trauma healing, but I do think it's important to just name that distinction and kind of give people a heads up, because people often talk about wanting to heal that intergenerational trauma or heal the lineage. But except in the case of spiritually initiated folks like indigenous shamans or experienced mediums, it is not the job of the living to heal the dead. We can definitely facilitate that work by initiating contact and showing that we care. We can engender our ancestors with that sense of being spiritually employed, that they are safe, seen, and secure with us. But the actual job of offering healing to the dead belongs to those who inhabit the realms of the dead. So it's the non-human allies, the other world, the spirit world, those that occupy the celestial realms or the underworld, however you conceive of wherever the dead reside. It's their job to enfold the restless dead into a healed lineage. So though we play a role in our ancestors' welfare and the state of their spiritual condition, for sure, ultimately, the work remains theirs, and they have to do that in cooperation with the greater benevolent forces. So we can encourage them and we can resource them, we can inspire them, we can love them up, right? We can feed them, we can give them a purpose and that sense of being spiritually employed so they can be of service to us. But we don't do the healing ourselves, and we don't need to be the vessel or the conduit for their healing. So if you are disturbed by restless dead, if you're one of those people who not just sees ghosts, but is there's something minxy going on here, be assured that in spite of perhaps their urgency or their insistence, their efforts to get your attention, you can say no and assert boundaries. You can refer them out to someone more qualified. And if you don't like some of your ancestors or you're ashamed of some of your ancestors, rest assured, you have many, 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 many ancestors to choose from. Your lineage is long and your lineage is diverse and full of a cast of characters that you have yet to meet. And some of them you will love and they will love you. And if the ones that you are engaging with just feel prickly, dense, heavy, just you get a no in your body, you can cast a wider net with your imagination and just allow yourself to be open to receiving love from unexpected people across time and space. Now, when it comes to connecting with ancestors, are there risks? What should we be aware of as we connect with the ancestors? Of course, there are some risks. Anything that has the potential to help also has the potential to harm. That's just a good rule to keep in your mind. There are people who've died who were real jerks in their lifetimes, and there are those of you you never knew who died who may still be a strongly felt presence in your life because of the way their deeds impacted your parents or extended family. You might be living with the trauma that they enacted on your family or on others. It gets very complicated with ancestors, and we all have both victim and perpetrator ancestors. And some of us grapple with ancestors who enacted genocide on indigenous peoples or the enslavement of Black folks, or who just were otherwise bigoted and prejudiced, right? There are people who've died violently or with surprising suddenness, who were not ready to die, and they do not enjoy being dead. They perhaps don't enjoy that others are still alive. These all fall under the umbrella of what I just spoke about. These are the restless dead, and the restless dead are just going to have to wait their turn. So back to boundaries. We can also sort of get our lines crossed a little bit in this area, and we can wind up connecting with non-human beings, kind of unsavory entities, let's say, that we just don't really want to get mixed up with, and we don't have to. If you want to hear more about that, check out Numinous Podcast episode number 99, Monsters and Magical Beings. Might be great to listen to at the Samhain season. Happy Halloween. So this is why we make a practice of calling in competent protectors to help. So a competent protector is an ally or a deity. You might actually know this person in real life. It could be your best friend. It doesn't have to be a human, though. It could be an element. It could be a tree. It could be an animal. It could be a non-human being, a fairy, a dragon. Your competent protector is one that is both sweet to us when we need sweetness, but also so competent that they would never let anything bad happen to us. So they would jump in and put themselves on the line for us. So we work with competent protectors and we ask them to clear the path for us and deal with any unsavory elements and deal with, they're like our bouncers. And so we have them keep the restless dead at bay. And so we begin with veneration, and in so doing, we attract loving, caring, protective ancestors who are ready and willing to protect us from scary entities or unwelcome elements, if that's the thing that you've got going on. Now, some cultures have taboos around the ancestor altar. Coming back to altars here. So some say that it should never be on the floor. Some say it should never be in your bedroom. It should never be opposite a mirror or some would say it shouldn't be exposed to the weather outside, which is again like, maybe, so you might build a spirit house for that purpose, or you might give them shelter outside the family home, a very specific place for them. Some cultures say you shouldn't visit the ancestor shrine if you're under the influence of substances, so drugs or alcohol. Others commune with their ancestors by ingesting plant medicine. Some cultures say you shouldn't approach the ancestral altar right after you've had sex. Some are, a lot more open about stuff like that, and you will find bras and lacy things on the altar, as offerings or recognition, Some say that you should never have images of the living and the dead together on a shrine. It's like bad luck for the living. So anyway, it's up to you how much you want to research that for yourself, right? I don't think there's hard and fast rules if you are a person who has grown up in a secular household and you're just trying to figure this out. I wouldn't try too hard to like reconstruct some kind of religious tradition that like you're not even part of anyway, or a cultural tradition that, it's not related to your lineage. But what I would say is go slow and really reflect, really check in. Do you want something because it feels right? Or is it because you feel lack, that you actually don't have an ancestral pattern to follow that you know of, and you wish that you did? So, be reflective so that you're not appropriating from another culture, okay? Go slow. Feel into what lands in your body as instinctively right or not quite right for you. Also, just a note, you do not have to buy anything. You do not have to buy anything. So as we move into like, what are the actual steps? The first step is delineate sacred space. And for this, you could use a cloth or a tray or just like a plate. So yes, you could have a beautiful linen altar cloth. I have so many altar cloths because I'm always like, oh, I just got a bag of Flanders lace at the auction the other day. Like, do I need an entire bag? No, but it was like, ooh, the lace, it's so beautiful. Anyway, maybe there's some beautiful embroidery that comes from the part of your world your ancestors are from, or, but you don't need that. You could literally put a dinner plate down, and that could be your sacred space. A shelf could be a sacred space, a tabletop, a windowsill. It even doesn't have to be inside, you could find a spot, clear a spot at the base of a tree, there might be a rock that kind of has a flat spot on top, Now I will say textile as like an altar cloth can be important for a few different reasons, namely because spinning, weaving, tanning, the fabrication of textiles has been very important and a very time-consuming aspect of the labor of daily life for like millennia. Textiles hold stories and symbolic power because of that. So you can be like extra considerate in your choices here. There may be something about the weaving of ancestral stories or feeling woven into a lineage or being transformed through application of practice that makes, an animal hide or a piece of cloth, some other kind of textile, seem particularly relevant for your ancestral altar. So just something to think about. Personally, I just think textiles hold such symbolic power, and I personally like to use rabbit hides that I have tanned from animals that I have raised and harvested. And rabbits have this totemic power for me as shapeshifters and magical beings. So when I use rabbit hide as an altar cloth, it just carries several dimensions of magic for me. Sometimes though, I like to anchor my altar with a certain color. And so I'll do that through fabrics because that color reminds me of an ancestor, or it's connected to a time of year, or it represents an emotional state, especially things like grief or lamentation, I don't know, maybe that's like I don't know if it's just association or if it's like a form of synesthesia, that like different colors have different, emotion theory and color is very common. But you will have your own kind of magical correspondences with colors, fabrics, textiles, and pattern. And that could be a really good anchor for your ancestral altar to delineate sacred space. You also want to think about bringing in the elements. And I like a balance of the elements with like fire and water at the very least. But some people want something a bit more earthy, to represent how ancestors ground us or are under the ground. Some people want a bit more air, like the smoke kind of rises up and gives us a connection to spirit. So think about the balance of the elements that you want to have. You can have more than one, and it doesn't have to be all of them, but those would be offerings that you could bring. Certainly a candle, like I sort of think at the very least, a candle, the flame of one's inner spirit can be so easily represented in a candle, and candles do seem to go hand in hand with like the votive offerings and the prayers. We bring candles to keep vigil. We bring candles to birthdays. They're there for all of the highlights, reels of a life. Candles are there. So it seems like a nice thing to bring to your ancestral altar. And then you would maybe want to add photos or objects connected to your beloved dead. So, the things like jewelry or watches that were dear to an ancestor. Sometimes my husband puts his great-grandfather's cufflinks or his pocket knife on the altar. Anything that's like a daily carry object would be a perfect thing to put on your dead, on your altar to connect with your beloved dead. And then memento mori. Memento mori means like, it's a reminder that you too may die at any time. So this is why we see bones, skulls, dried flowers. Those are all great to have on your ancestral altar. And then we make offerings, food, drink, incense. These are all considered offerings. And when we make an offering like that, we call it propitiation. So you can invite your dead to enjoy them with you as part of your daily connection ritual, or you could just put a little bit at your altar and be like, here you go, this is for you. And just like a tiny morsel will do. Now, some people say, yes, go ahead. If you put some food on the altar and then you do a ritual, you can go ahead and eat it. And then it's like you are dining with this deity or this beloved dead. So why wouldn't you eat the food? And I get that, especially you might have misgivings about wasting food, or you might not have the budget to waste food. Personally, I don't eat them. For me, the spiritual energy has been given to the ancestor, and now there's no spiritual nutrition in that food. And it would be like eating off of somebody else's plate at dinner. That would feel weird to me. But that's just me. So maybe there's something in between. Another thing that I often do is like after a little while, after 3 days, let's say, I would remove it to the compost or the food scraps bin, and I would just say a little prayer of like thanks. But if it's, I've got the ancestor plate and I've taken a bite of everything from, Christmas dinner, I will take it outside and put it at the base of a tree. And we have like raccoons and rats and mice and things like that where I live. And who's to say the raccoons are not ancestors, right? So sometimes I'll even allow my dog to eat them. My dog will always go, when I open the back door, loves to go running towards the ancestor tree to see if there's anything there. So yeah, especially if it's like the ancestor plate where we take a morsel from each dish being served and put it on the ancestor plate and put outside. Mona, my dog, just makes a beeline for that. Another thing you could do is instead of putting an offering down of food or drink or incense, is you could put an empty plate at the table. So set a table setting and have a chair there. And that is, I think they call that the dumb dinner. Basically, it's like a silent dinner or a dinner where there is a plate set out for the ancestor, or like the guest who will never arrive. It's the seat for the beloved dead where no one sits. Other things that could go on your ancestral altar would be like sweets or flowers, toiletries, perfumes, soaps. These are like anything that is almost romantic, you could say, but just to beautify and to propitiate them with luxury, that they are special and they are worth being adored and adorned. And then there's also the thing you do after, like, so, you're venerating your ancestors. Sometimes you're asking them for help. You're asking them for intercession. You are praying for them to bless you, either generally or in very specific ways. If you've like prayed to your ancestors for something to come to pass, like a healing, for instance, then after the prayer has been answered, you could leave ex votos. So ex votos means an item that's left for prayers received. So you would also leave offerings as thanks. And often it's just like a candle is lit, but in ancient Rome and other parts of the world, you have these like large caches of pottery that get found, of ceramics, and they're often in the shape of body parts. So like feet represent safe travel, or a phallus will represent getting pregnant. And so people would make this offering of like, thank you for that safe travel, or will you please help us get pregnant? And so there would be these ceramic representations of their prayer, either before it came to pass or after. And so again, the paper clay man, air dry clay, I highly recommend this. It's like a great way to make offerings in little representations of your prayer, or ex votos. The ex votos is easy because I often just do like a little heart and write thank you on it. And so I would like make an ex voto out of paper clay. I don't know if it's voto or votos for singular. Anyway, make it out of paper clay, and then I would just like bury that under my ancestor tree. So all kinds of things that could go on your altar. I'm sure there's many categories I haven't mentioned. One thing I want to say is like, do tend your altar. The point of like having this focused time is to show that you care and you're paying attention and you're tracking them. So don't let your altar get too dusty. Maybe you've got like a little hand broom, a turkey tail broom or something like that in your witchy cupboard that you could use. Don't let the waters, evaporate until they get like slimy and stuff. Don't let the flowers get kind of ugly looking. Just like, don't let things get gross on your ancestor altar, right? This is why we do it for just the amount of time that you can give it the time and attention that they would need to feel like you care about them and feel like they're special. If at some point you're kind of like, oh, good, I'm kind of falling down on this, then just wrap it up. Just be like, and scene. That's the end of this particular ritual of veneration and propitiation at the ancestral altar. Now, if you receive a message from your ancestors or a visitation or some kind of wonderful synchronicity, you can also use your altar to let them know, like, message received, I feel your presence. One way that I dialogue with the ancestors is having an oracle card deck on my altar, and that's really nice. And so, yeah, sometimes if I got an inspired idea and I feel like, oh, that's like the answer to my prayers, and I just want to thank my ancestors for giving me that idea, I'll literally just walk up to the altar and put my hand on it and say thank you. So, again, ways you can connect with your ancestors beyond the altar, like you could think of like your body as a walking altar, right? Your body is a temple to your ancestors. So even if you don't delineate sacred space, there are other things you could do. You could, like on the physical level, you could be eating and drinking the foods of your ancestors. You could be orienting towards the elements that they seem to prefer. You know, if you had ancestors who were desert people, then maybe you need to have like some sun worship, you know? If you had ancestors who were real rivers and streams people. Maybe you need to, make a visit there. Other things you could do if you're staying closer to home is like using aromatherapy of the fruits and flowers of their lands, or wear their jewelry and sentimental objects, have them around, make them a sigil or a coat of arms, put the tools of their trade front and center, take up some of the crafts and hobbies and skills. There's music, singing, art, little special phrases, language, amulets, clothing. You could look up their grave sites on Find a Grave, like look on Google Street View at the places they used to live. Oh, funny story. Okay, so one time I did that. I was looking up where my great-great ancestors were in the like Tulloch Delny area of Scotland. And I just went on Google Maps and just like dropped the little person icon down so that you're like down at Street View. And the image that came up, I was like, what? This is uncannily familiar. It looks so similar to the farmer's field at Four Ways Corner, which is what this intersection was called, kind of in the country where my grandma lived. And so I took a screenshot and I sent it to my Auntie Debbie and said, hey, do you recognize this image? And she said, oh, that looks like the farmer's field down at Four Ways Corner. And I said, no, that's where our ancestors are from in Scotland. So I think that's a really fun thing to do is, see if you can find how the land would have looked to your ancestors back then. That is doing your ancestral research is definitely your genealogy stuff. That is definitely ancestral veneration. So traveling, even if it's just traveling on Google Maps, that also counts. My grandma was a beautician, and I will say when I put on makeup and watch movies with like Elizabeth Taylor or Jane Russell, who she looked a lot like, really any of the movies from like the 40s and 50s, I feel closer to her. And okay, another funny story. I'm in family constellation training, and I'm really not. I'm like my grandma in so many ways. She was like very entrepreneurial. She was very fiery. I think she enjoyed the company of men. She was a single divorcee in the late 50s, 60s, right? So, but she was very different from me. When you like opened up my grandma's fridge, inside where normally people, like normal people would have condiments, she had nail polishes. And so I was celebrating my grandmother's, well, it was my mother's birthday. And so I was celebrating it would have been my grandmother's first child, her first daughter. And I saw these fake nails, these longer fake nails, and they had like a gold tip French manicure, totally not something I would normally wear, but they were like mauve with gold. And I thought, Isabel, which is what I called my grandma, I was like, Isabel would love those. I would never wear those in a million years. But then I was like, I am supposed to be, I've recently discovered I'm a soft autumn. When I was a little kid, my grandma, who did all the other things too, right? Like she wasn't just a hairdresser and a cosmetician, what is it? The person who does cosmetology, a beautician. She had like tanning beds. She sold Amway. She did Color Me Beautiful. And everybody on TikTok is all about their seasons right now. And when I was like 7, I knew that I was a true spring because my grandma used me as a model for Color Me Beautiful when I was just a child. So TikTok has recently educated me and informed me that all these years later, it turns out I'm actually a soft autumn. So this is like totally rocking my world, my identity. I don't even like a lot of those colors, but I've been trying to gravitate towards it because like it's true, it looks better on me. I had just purchased this green kind of V-neck, sort of tight knit sweater. I don't like green. This is not a color I'd ever want to wear, but I did because I was like, soft autumn, I should try my colors. So that day that I saw these fake nails, I happened to be wearing that sweater. And I was like, they actually look kind of nice with this sweater. in honor of Isabel, I'm going to put on these fake nails and wear this sweater. So the next day, it's my constellation, family constellations training. If you don't know what that is, well, hopefully you're kind of getting a sense. It's a way of working with the ancestors. It's kind of like throwing the bones, but with people standing up. Anyway, in this exercise, this woman who had never really, she only learned about family constellations like a few weeks earlier, and it was so resonant for her, she took this training. We end up in a breakout, and in the breakout, you're supposed to ask your partner, would you represent one of my ancestors? And so, it being Isabel's birthing day, I said to this person, would you be willing to represent my grandmother, whose name was Isabel? And she said, sure, I'd be happy to. And this woman, very new to constellations, I'm very experienced with them. This woman steps in and is like, going to represent my grandmother. She closes her eyes and she starts saying, oh, this woman is so proud of you. She loves you so much, but in a way that is about pride. She's a very commanding and kind of almost demanding presence, which this is maybe how I'm like Isabel. Anyway, she said, oh, I could totally see her like really holding court at whatever her place of work is and almost like forcing people to listen, like really insisting that people listen to how talented you are and how proud she is of you. And my friends, when I tell you that that is what Isabel used to do, she would put up all my art and she would like make me come down to the shop, the beauty shop, and she'd be like, look at Carmen, put on this Amway makeup. Here, put on some makeup and show people how you do your makeup. I was like 7 and I would put on my makeup and she'd be like, doesn't she look great? Isn't her art great? Oh, she's so smart at school. I was in like grade 1. Anyway, and these poor people would be like stuck in her chair getting their hair cut or permed. And they had to listen to her. So this volunteer that I was with totally was nailing her. But then she goes, she also is like really concerned about how you're presenting yourself, like physically. And I kind of laughed because of course I'm just very practical now these days. I used to like wear stilettos and wrap dresses and do all my nails, all that stuff when I worked in wine and spirits. But that was like 20 years ago. I'm like, as I said, I'm becoming a farm wife. I got horses. Anyway, this volunteer says, she loves what you're wearing. She thinks that color is perfect on you. She loves your nails and she loves the color. So this volunteer had no idea she was absolutely channeling Isabel. It was wonderful. So it was very affirming that when I put on makeup, my grandma, she was such a bombshell. She was so like iconic. She would wear a bright red matching crop top and shorts with bright red heels, out into the world at the age of like 55, totally confident, full belly bearing, just, iconic, which is like totally not me. But it made so much sense that Isabel would be like, stop wearing such frumpy clothes when she's getting channeled to me. Anyway. When I work in the garden, when I work with animals, when I work with horses, because Isabel loved horses, I feel closer to those grandparents and those great-grandparents that I never even met. But I know of them through like reputation and family folklore. So when I sing in Scottish Gaelic, I feel closer to those ancestors than I've ever felt because, those records don't go back very far. I don't know very much about those people, but I know that was their language. So I commend to you, my friends, whatever makes you feel closer is a form of ancestral veneration, and they love that shit. They love it when you do that. On the emotional level too, like again, here, art can inspire really deeply emotionally felt resonance. Watch the movies they love, listen to the music they love, do some journaling, have some heartfelt conversations with them, just make some tea, ask other family members for oral history and storytelling, and there could be lots of like non-linear, non-rational ways of connecting when you're just like following your instinct. Just go where you feel drawn or moved, and maybe you can't explain it, but you just feel inspired and you feel closer to them in this pursuit, And another thing you can do is prayer, just speaking to your ancestors like, I love you, and feeling their love and being present to that. On the mental level too, things you can do, like I mentioned, like create or research your family tree, genealogy, go through the old photos and letters, label them, look through newspaper clippings, website research, and then just like daydreaming, just like do trance journey work, visit with them in your mind, have mental dialogue and conversations. Try to list all the names and naming conventions of places, And then on the kind of meta level, like in terms of like, okay, I have an ancestral veneration practice. That's all the things I've been describing so far are very kind of personal. But then there's also the like continuity piece that you are part of a lineage. So continuing to honor birthdays, death days, anniversaries with observances. And those observances could be as simple as just saying hello to them that day, but it could be more complex, like making a shadow box or a shrine or altar offerings or doing special trance work. So this season, I encourage you to set up an ancestor altar and visit regularly. Now, regularly is going to mean something different to everyone. My rhythm, as I mentioned, is to set the altar up sometime the last week of October, and I visit pretty daily until, November 3rd, 4th, or 5th, something like that. And then for the rest of the month of November, I pretty much just freshen up the flowers, maybe every few days. But the day that I really focus on through November is Saturdays, because Saturday is ruled by Saturn. And in Hellenistic astrology, Saturn rules over the 8th house, which is the house of death. And Saturn is like a father time figure. Saturn is the god of the harvest, the god of boundaries, the god of inheritances. And, we can think of inheritances quite broadly. So like not just the material things that get passed down, but like the blessings and the burdens that we inherit from our ancestors. So that kind of comes under the purview of the 8th house ruled by Saturn. So as part of my planetary magic practice, Saturdays are the time I like to check in with my beloved dead. And if you want to learn more about planetary magic, because it's the season of the witch, you could check out a podcast series, the Astro Magic series I did, I think it was last summer. The Astro Magic mini-series is 7 days, and we go through the planetary magic of each day of the week. Most of those episodes feature a guest astrologer who engages in planetary magic and works with the ruler of the day, planetary ruler of each day of the week, and that's my ongoing spiritual practice. So when I'm not in like a rhythm of daily visiting the altar, but I have it up through late autumn and throughout the holidays in the winter, I'm usually checking on Saturdays until, of course, I get to Yuletide, which is the 12 days, December 21st to January 1st, where the altar is like very central to my daily practice again. And, when it's kind of like the less focused times, the less kind of like intensely centered time of connecting with ancestors, it's more like weekly. When I say check in, it's usually a matter of just like lighting a candle and sitting at the altar. I'll imagine sometimes I'm in a place where I meet with these ancestors. Sometimes it's an ancestor I know. Sometimes it's like a very ancient dead. I have to ask their name. An ancestor whose name I don't know, like they're from records like so far back that there are no records. They're like lost in the mists of time. I just imagine that they're coming forth to meet me because we share some kind of lineage, and they almost represent not just an individual, but they like represent the lineage themselves. I think of those very ancient dead as being like oversouls of the entire lineage. Anyway, so sometimes an ancestor comes forward and there's some kind of strong connection to a time or place. For this practice, which is again, just like veneration and honoring, not that I'm resolving intergenerational trauma. For this practice, I'm just asking for supportive ancestors to like come and sit with me, just like hang out. So it's not the restless dead who are in pain and who might wish for my help. It's the other way around. It's like the ones who are well resolved and spiritually robust, and they have some kind of strength to ask me, to offer me. And I'm not really asking them for anything. I'm just like being in their strength. I'm kind of merging with them a little bit and allowing myself to feel that strength within me that I have in my lineage. And when I drop in and I'm hanging out with this supportive, benevolent ancestor, and they're like showing me what the blessings are from this lineage, I will just say, will you bless me? Will you bless my life? And then I just stay in the receiving of that. So periodically in November, certainly on Saturdays, I'm attending to my ancestral altar, making offerings. In that Yuletide season, December 21st, to January 1st. I'm visiting every day. And in that period, I'm like rearranging and redecorating the altar to reflect the change of weather and the turn of the wheel of the year. Because that December 21st winter solstice, now the altar is like the main focus of that wheel of the year observance. Again, you can like read about that in detail in my book, The Spirited Kitchen. So if you have been listening to this podcast for a long time and you've participated in that annual Yuletide tradition, it's like going back several years ago now. It used to be called Yuletide Stocking Stuffer. And at that time, it was like just an inexpensive program that came to you via email. And you get an email every day for the 20 days of Yuletide. 12 days. So every day you'd get this like 20-minute audio track describing the folklore and magical symbolism associated with each day of Yuletide. And then you get like a 4-minute meditation to help you stay like calm and centered and peaceful when the calendar gets more chaotic. But that program grew. And so it became this like more expanded program with like live events and ritual crafting and baking, and then became like daily altar time. It just kind of kept expanding and getting bigger and bigger. And then in the last couple of years, you've needed to sign up for the Numinous Network in order to access it. This year, I think I'm going to do something different. This year, I think I might offer 2 tracks. One, the full program in the Numinous Network with all those extra awesome events. But 2, like the second one, like A and B, the B would be like a mini program where you just get the private podcast and meditations again. As always, I'm going to update. Well, I normally update 4 episodes a year. This year, I think I'll do half of them. And as always, you're going to get an extra long trance journey on January 1st to vision the year ahead. So if you find yourself like really enjoying working with your altar as a spiritual practice this season, then you are definitely going to love what we do at Yuletide and how we like transmute the chaos and the overwhelm of that time of year into this calming, peaceful, meaningful, loving, authentic practice of connection to like the best of ourselves and the best of humanity. And I think even more importantly, we give honor and respect and reverence also to the land and the animals and the plants, which are also our ancestors, which you could definitely include at Samhain as well too. But we really focus on that at the Yuletide season and on all of our guides in the unseen realms. It's just like a really beautiful devotional space for this like short but very dedicated period of time, just those 12 days. It's really, really beautiful. It's also something you can share with your family and do alongside your friends or in community. I've heard like all kinds of ways that people like to share the Yuletide season, the spirit of Yuletide together. That's what I'm calling it now. It used to be Yuletide stocking stuffer because it was like a cheap little thing you could buy as a stocking stuffer for yourself. Now I call it the spirit of Yuletide because we're kind of like in the spiritual practice of this wheel of the year. Anyway, lots of people tell me they like to listen to the podcast with like their partner in the morning with coffee or in the car with their kids. It's just like a really beautiful thing to share a sacred space with the ones you love. And especially this is like a nice secular way to do it. Like if you're not from a religious background, but you want to bring more meaningfulness into your life, you know, you could start with just an ancestral altar at Samhain and see how that feels. And if you like it, you should definitely come check out the Spirit of Yuletide. Especially if you're trying to have an anti-capitalist Christmas, you want to have some kind of meaningful relationship, you got to make the meaning. Anyway, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here. All of this to say is that if you've been kind of nervous about having an altar, or if you felt like embarrassed about other people seeing it, hopefully this episode you just listened to will inspire you to at least start by creating a special little shrine for your beloved dead. And honestly, nobody worth your time is going to mock you for that, right? If anybody ever mocks you for having an altar out, like a shrine, ask your beloved dead to teach that person to smarten up. That's what I would do. Anyway, get them off my back, please. Anyway, even better, you could ask your beloved dead to help those people open their hearts, just ask your ancestors, please bless us with your presence and bless us with more openness and closeness and intimacy and spiritual connection through this devotion to you. And so it is. So I hope you'll be able to carve out a bit of time for yourself this Witch's New Year and create some sacred space, create an altar to give some focus and some heft, to your process during this time of year. The leaves are falling, the landscape is starker. It's just very conducive to reflection and contemplation. If you can find time over this first weekend of November to take yourself on a mini spiritual retreat at home, a little staycation, I think it'd be really nice to ritually accompany each other in this kind of way. All of us doing it at the same time and just knowing that you're not alone. You're doing it with many other people too. I don't know how many thousands of downloads per episodes people will have in just this weekend. I won't know until after, but let's say, I don't know, on average, let's say in the first week, there's going to be 2,000 to 3,000 downloads. Even if it's only 10% or 5% or 1%, I don't know, there's somewhere between dozens to hundreds of people who would be putting their spiritual well-being at the center of their life for a bit, There'd be a whole bunch of us stepping into a deeper process with their soul care and their ancestors and spirits of place where they reside, the plants, the animals, the elements that are medicinal for them. It'll just feel really nice, step in with us. It's very cool. It's very good to do. Just come on in. Welcome to this greater field of community practice. And, if you find time to join us, if you have time to join us on November 1st, Friday, November 1st at, I think it's 10 to 11:30 a.m. Pacific, that's when we're doing our live Wheel of the Year gathering. This year we are celebrating Hecate's Depnan, because it's the new moon. So in the ancient Greek world, in the dark moon, which is the days leading up to the new moon, it would be Hecate's Supper or Depnan. And so it's just kind of aligning pretty much for us this year. So if you want, you could totally join us. Create your altar first, show up with offerings for Hecate. So you would join us in the Numinous Network for the live event. But even if you don't join us in the network, know that a bunch of us are here doing this together. We're doing our thing. It's nice to know that you're out there too, doing your thing. And all together, we're strengthening a field of awareness around these things that we really care about. And we're amplifying and strengthening that signal. So may we find each other somehow, someday, just as you and I found each other here right now. It's a nice thing. So if you like this episode and you want to leave me some feedback or you have a question for me, you can go to the show notes in your podcast player or at numinouspodcast.com, and you'll find a link to leave me a voicemail or a written note. Or if for whatever reason you just want to go to a browser right now, you can go to castfeedback.com/numinouspodcast. I love getting notes. They're not all radio worthy, meaning I haven't really read very many online because they're often just kind of it's almost like a way to text me, but I love hearing about it. I love hearing how this episode landed for you, so please don't hesitate. I'm wide open. Drop me a line. And my listener shout out today, I would like to thank Marlena. Thank you so much, Marlena. I love that you listen. Thank you. Thank you for leaving a sweet review for the show with 5 stars. It's titled Soul Food. Marlena writes, "The Numinous podcast is a warm cup of tea on a cold day. I have savored every episode over the last few years." Wow, that's a lot of episodes. It helps me learn. It inspires me. It nourishes me. It's a part of my me time and is time well spent. Highly recommended. Marlena, thank you so much for taking the time to write a review. I appreciate you, and you're doing exactly what I'm describing, this thing that like we're all together. It feels so good. Feels so good. Okay, the last thing I want to share with you before I go, gut-directed hypnotherapy. I've created this program, and I've realized now that like the first sort of cohort of people have started using it. It's like asynchronous, so you can start it on your own time. There's not live events. It's all pre-recorded like videos and audios. But now a bunch of people are well into the 3rd week, I guess. And I'm realizing, you know who loves this program is overperforming caretakers. Overburdened, overperforming, overfunctioning caretakers. Most of them identifying as women, not all, but a lot. So a lot of overfunctioning women who are like handling things, managing things, stick handling, overseeing, holding a lot of things, their gastrointestinal systems are not okay. Okay, so if that's you, you should look at the Numinous Network because of my new gut-directed hypnotherapy program. It's a program to support symptom management for anyone experiencing, I should say suffering from, disorders of the gut-brain interaction, DGBIs, gut-brain interaction. And there's like overlapping syndromes, right? So it could be irritable bowel syndrome, reflex hypersensitivity, functional dyspepsia, myalgic encephalomyelitis, so MECFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, functional abdominal pain. There's like a million different things that you might have, but anything that's a disorder involving your gut, involving your brain, this hypno program, it's a 5-week program. You get it with the Numinous Network. This is who's loving it. Overfunctioning caretakers. And it's based on decades of research out of the University of Manchester. Like they've been doing gut-directed hypnotherapy programs at that university hospital since like the 80s. Also, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, they've been doing it since the 90s. So the training, the continuing education, the research, the literature has been a combination of those 2 programs that I've done, as well as recent continuing education through the Rome Foundation. If you have a DGBI, you should know about the Rome Foundation. They're an independent nonprofit that provides support to researchers and doctors to create scientific data, to like create educational information, and to help assist in the diagnosis and treatment of DGBI. So they're trying to come up with like a global standard and treatment recommendations so that doctors can diagnose and get people into treatment much more quickly. Anyway, this program is for all of that, but it also works to support symptoms like fatigue, post-exertional malaise, sleep disturbance, pain, neurological and cognitive manifestations, and like autonomic or like immune system manifestations. So like, because gut-brain interactions, disorders of the gut-brain interaction are comorbid with those other diseases. They go hand in hand. And so sometimes you have a different disease. You have like food sensitivities, or you have myofascial pain, you have POTS, you have lupus, Lyme, Hashimoto's, MCAS, that kind of stuff. Then you would be one of the people who most likely has a disorder of the gut-brain interaction, because those things, those forms of autoimmunity are like the definition of that. So I've said all these different words, assuming you know what that is. If you don't know what it is, just let it go. It's not for you. But if you're like, this, I've heard of that, or that sounds familiar, or yes, I have that, you should look at this program. You can start immediately. Like I said, it's all on-demand video and audio. There's a forum with a chat function if you want to connect with fellow participants, or if you want to crowdsource information. And of course, we always this whole time we've had the Numinous Network, we've also had the sensitive systems and long COVID connection group. So there are a very large percentage. There's like probably over 100 people that you could connect with that have a lot of knowledge, experience, and education that could probably help you understand what do you probably have if you don't have a diagnosis. Anywho, we meet twice a month with that group, but there's also an ongoing forum. Also, okay, last thing I'm going to say about it, I keep thinking of new things, but remember, like a lot of neurosparkly people have trouble with sleep and they have trouble with digestive issues. They are also loving the gut-directed hypnotherapy program. So this program could apply even if your symptoms are like highly variable, highly contextual. Anyway, you just have to join the Numinous Network to get started. You can find out more at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, which will be tomorrow, take care.